The first thing people noticed was the smoke. Not from the cabin chimney. From the ground. Thin trails of warmth rising through the snow between Martha Bell's cabin and the hillside root cellar behind it. At first, folks assumed something underground had caught fire. Then they saw Martha hauling stone. Again and again. Every day through late autumn. She carried flat rock from the frozen creek bed and disappeared into a trench sheet carved between the cabin and the cellar hill. That was when the laughing started. Jonas Hale leaned against the fence one morning watching her work while snow drifted softly across the valley. "You planning to build a road for moles?" he called. Several men nearby laughed. Martha didn't look up. She kept setting stone carefully into the trench wall, hands red from cold despite thick gloves. Jonas smirked. Most folks just walk outside to reach their cellar. Martha finally stood slowly, brushing snow from her coat. Most folks lose half their heat every time they open a door in winter. Jonas laughed harder. "So you're building an underground hallway?" "Yes. That's the strangest thing I've heard all year." Martha returned calmly to work. Because she wasn't building for appearances. She was building for January. The previous winter had nearly destroyed her. Not with one great disaster. With repetition. Every morning, she crossed waist-deep snow to reach the root cellar for potatoes, preserved food, or firewood stored below the frost line. Every trip opened the cabin to freezing air. Every trip carried snow and wind back inside with her. By February, frost coated the inside corners of the cabin walls. Her cellar remained stable and cool underground. Her cabin did not. That difference stayed in her mind all spring. Then one evening while cleaning the cellar after thaw season, she realized something simple. The root cellar already held the most stable temperature on the property. Why not connect the cabin directly to it? Not outside. Inside the earth. Once the idea settled into her mind, she couldn't let it go. So through summer and autumn, Martha planned carefully. The cellar sat slightly uphill behind the cabin beneath a mound reinforced with stone retaining walls. The distance between structures measured only about 20 feet. Short enough to tunnel. Long enough to matter. She dug the trench first by hand. Narrow. Deep. Below the frost line. People watched with growing amusement as the passage slowly stretched between the cabin foundation and the root cellar entrance. You building a grave? Maybe hiding from taxes underground. Woman's gone half rabbit. Martha ignored all of it. Because the deeper she dug, the more stable the earth became. Cool. Still. Protected from wind entirely. Exactly what she wanted. She lined the trench walls with stacked stone and sealed gaps using packed clay. Above, she laid thick timber beams across the top before covering them with additional stone and earth. By October, the passage looked almost invisible from outside. Just a slight rise beneath the snow connecting cabin and hillside. Inside, warm lantern light revealed a narrow stone corridor tall enough to walk through comfortably. The packed earth surrounding it insulated naturally while the stone retained steady temperature. The root cellar itself already stayed above freezing most winters. Now the cabin connected directly into that stable underground environment. People still laughed, but less confidently now, because the tunnel looked solid, intentional, useful, even if they refused to admit it aloud. Jonas visited one afternoon while Martha sealed the final interior doorway between the cabin pantry and the passage entrance. He stared at the stone corridor disappearing into the earth behind her. "You really mean to walk underground all winter?" Martha hammered another hinge into place. "Yes." Jonas shook his head. "Seems like a lot of work just to avoid snow." "It's not about snow." "What's it about then?" Martha glanced toward the tunnel. "Heat." Jonas frowned. "What heat?" "The one that stays underground instead of blowing away." That answer irritated him slightly because, once again, it sounded reasonable. He stepped into the passage cautiously. The difference struck him immediately. No wind. No sharp cold. The air felt steady and strangely calm compared to outside. Jonas looked around at the stone walls. "Feels warmer in here already." "It is." He frowned deeper. "How?" "The earth doesn't change temperature quickly." Jonas touched one stone wall. Cold, but not freezing, not bitter, just steady. Still, he laughed again before leaving. "Guess we'll see what happens when real winter comes." Martha watched him go, then returned to work quietly. Because real winter was exactly what she prepared for. The first frost arrived early that year. Thin ice formed across water barrels before sunrise. Snow followed only days later, covering the valley in white before most families finished splitting firewood. Cabins sealed shut against growing cold. Smoke rose constantly from chimneys. At Martha's place, something unusual began happening almost immediately. The cabin temperature stopped fluctuating so violently. Ordinary homes overheated near the stove and froze near exterior walls. Martha's cabin stayed more balanced. The underground stone passage acted almost like a thermal buffer between the cellar and cabin. Cold air no longer rushed directly into living spaces whenever she needed supplies. The earth around the tunnel moderated temperature naturally. Even better, the root cellar's stable underground air slowly tempered the connected pantry and rear portion of the cabin itself. Nothing dramatic, just steady warmth where there used to be freezing drafts. By December, Martha burned noticeably less wood. That caught people's attention faster than anything else. Because wood meant survival, and everyone watched their piles carefully once winter deepened. Jonas noticed first. "You're using less," he said one morning while helping repair a frozen fence post nearby. Martha nodded. "Much less." "How?" "The cabin loses less heat." Jonas looked toward the buried stone passage beneath the snow. "That tunnel actually doing something?" "Yes." He stared at the snow-covered ridge connecting cabin and cellar. No drifting around it. No exposed entrance except the stone doorway itself. Just quiet earth beneath white snow. "Still looks strange," he muttered. "Winter usually does." That night, the real freeze arrived. Not ordinary cold. The kind that settles over a valley and stays. Temperatures dropped lower each day until cabin walls cracked from contraction and exposed water buckets froze solid indoors. Wind drove snow hard enough to bury fences entirely. People fed fires constantly and still woke shivering before dawn. But Martha's cabin held. Not hot. Not tropical. Steady. The tunnel prevented cold shock every time she entered the cellar. The underground stone retained stable temperature long after outside air plunged below zero. Heat from the cabin slowly warmed portions of the passage itself, creating a protected thermal corridor beneath the snow. The system worked better than even Martha expected. Then the blizzard came, the kind people remembered for years afterward. Wind erased roads overnight. Snow buried cabin doors halfway to the roofline. Men fought drifts just to reach woodpiles outside. Late one evening during the storm, pounding struck Martha's cabin door. She opened it carefully against screaming wind. Jonas Hale stumbled inside, carrying his youngest daughter beneath heavy blankets. Snow coated both of them white. "Our cellar door froze shut," he said hoarsely. "Can't reach half our food without going outside again." Then he looked past Martha toward the warm lantern glow spilling softly from the underground stone passage behind her. At the calm air. At the warmth rising gently from beneath the earth itself. And for the first time, Jonas Hale stopped laughing at the tunnel. Martha stepped aside immediately. "Bring her in." Jonas carried his daughter through the doorway, while snow blasted briefly into the cabin behind him. Martha shut the door hard against the wind, sealing the warmth inside again. That was the first thing Jonas noticed. The warmth returned immediately. In most cabins, opening the door during a storm let the cold invade everything. Heat vanished within seconds. Here, the cabin recovered almost instantly. His daughter slowly lifted her face from the blankets. "It's warm," she whispered. Martha pointed toward the pantry entrance. "Come here." Jonas followed her cautiously toward the stone passage. Warm lantern light glowed softly down the tunnel beneath the earth. The air felt calm there. Still, almost protected from the storm entirely. No wind. No drifting snow. No sharp, cold biting exposed skin. Just steady underground coolness tempered by warmth from the cabin itself. Jonas stared into the tunnel. "You walk through this every day?" "Yes." "To the cellar?" Martha nodded, without opening an outside door. He shook his head slowly. Outside, the storm howled hard enough to rattle shutters. Inside the stone corridor, silence. His daughter stretched one hand toward the warm lantern hanging along the wall. "Feels safe," she murmured. That word stayed with Jonas. Safe, not simply warm. Protected. Another pounding struck the outer cabin door. Martha opened it carefully. Mrs. Carter stumbled in wrapped in quilts, followed by the Miller brothers carrying sacks of frozen supplies against their shoulders. Our back entrance drifted shut completely. One of them said breathlessly, "Can't even reach the cellar now." Martha stepped aside again. "Come inside." The cabin filled steadily after that. Families arrived exhausted from digging through snow, carrying children, blankets, and whatever food they managed to save before the storm buried everything else. Most looked first at the stove, then at the tunnel, because the difference became obvious immediately. Every trip to a normal root cellar during storms meant opening doors repeatedly to brutal cold. Warmth escaped constantly. Snow entered the house. Floors froze wet by morning. Martha's tunnel eliminated all of it. The underground corridor connected survival directly to shelter itself. And beneath the earth, temperature remained steady. Jonas walked slowly through the stone passage toward the cellar entrance while others settled inside the cabin. Lantern light flickered softly across stacked stone walls. Snow muffled every sound overhead. The deeper he walked, the more stable the air became. Then he entered the root cellar itself. Shelves lined the walls packed with preserved vegetables, jars, dried herbs, sacks of potatoes, and neatly stacked firewood kept dry beneath the earth. No frozen hinges. No buried door. No fighting the storm just to survive another day. Jonas stood silently for several seconds, then laughed once under his breath. Not mocking. Amazed. She really thought this through, one of the Miller brothers whispered behind him. Jonas nodded slowly. More than the rest of us did. The storm worsened overnight. Wind screamed across the valley hard enough to tear shutters free from cabins downhill. Snow buried pathways entirely. Men trying to reach outdoor woodpiles disappeared waist-deep in drifts. But Martha's home remained stable. The tunnel prevented heat loss every time supplies were needed. The surrounding earth insulated naturally. Stone walls absorbed and released warmth slowly, while the snowpack above added even more protection from wind. Inside, people moved between cabin and cellar freely beneath the ground while the storm raged overhead. Children even slept inside the passage for a time, wrapped in blankets against the warm stone walls where temperatures stayed surprisingly steady. Mrs. Carter touched the tunnel wall quietly one evening. Feels like the earth itself is protecting us. Martha adjusted another lantern hook. In a way it is. Because that was the truth. Most homes fought winter from the outside. Martha's design used the earth itself as insulation. That realization spread quietly through the crowded cabin as the blizzard continued. By morning, the worst had finally passed. The wind weakened first. Then snowfall slowed. Martha opened the cabin door carefully. Snowdrifts rose nearly to the windows outside. Several nearby cabins had completely buried cellar entrances beneath massive banks of snow. But the stone tunnel entrance inside her pantry remained clear. Warm. Usable. People stepped outside slowly, staring across the damaged valley before turning back toward the buried ridge connecting cabin and cellar beneath the snow. The thing they laughed at. The thing that now looked brilliant. Jonas stood beside Martha near the doorway, his daughter asleep against his shoulder. I called this a rabbit tunnel, he admitted quietly. Martha smiled faintly. You did. Jonas looked toward the hidden underground passage. And now half the valley's probably wishing they built one. Others nearby laughed softly at that. Because it was true. The weeks after the storm changed how people built. Not all at once, but steadily. More root cellars connected directly to homes. Covered passages appeared first between barns and cabins. Then insulated underground storage corridors. Families started thinking differently about winter altogether. Not just how to survive above ground, but how to use the stability beneath it. And always, their eyes drifted back toward Martha Bell's cabin near the hillside. The one connected to the earth itself. One evening near the first spring thaw, Jonas stopped beside the snow-covered ridge above the buried tunnel. You know, he said, I spent months thinking this looked strange. Martha stood beside him watching smoke rise gently from her chimney into the fading sky. And now, Jonas smiled. Now it looks prepared. Martha glanced toward the hidden stone corridor beneath their feet. The passage that turned storms into something survivable. The passage people mocked until winter arrived. Then she looked across the valley where new trenches had already begun appearing beneath melting snow. No, she said quietly. Now it looks necessary.